everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Pound for Pound Leader Podcast. I'm Mike Kai, your host. Join me as I drop leadership tips and have insightful conversations with leaders from around the world. I'm so glad that you joined me today. Take a moment and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Now, let's jump into this week's episode and take your leadership to the next peak. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on the Pound for Pound Leader Podcast. I'm so excited to get to know you, and also met you over a year ago at John Maxwell's event at the golf tournament, and also get the opportunity to talk story with you. Everybody, I want to welcome Jonathan to the podcast. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here with you, man. I'm super excited, and it was great to connect with you there at the Maxwell event, and just a lot of fun. It was super cool.
That's awesome. We got introduced by a mutual friend in Dave Martin.
The one and only Dave Martin.
He's the best. I remember seeing on his Instagram post this great church building, and I thought to myself, where are you? I mean, I probably thought I had the nicest church interior, and but this one looks even better than ours. And he says, it's my friend, Jonathan Brozozog. And I said, what is it called? He says, called Creative Church. And tell us on how long have you guys been pastoring the church? And was that the original name, or did you pick a different name? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, Dave's awesome. He's one of my best friends in all the world. And I got to tell him he's just been a solid, great friend. But I got to tell him stop bragging on me like that. But he's pretty cool. So yeah, Creative Church. We started church, 19 years ago, with 4 people back when, I don't know, I'd say church planting wasn't cool, and and so we originally started as Passion Church, and we changed the name actually during the pandemic, and we knew we wanted to change it several years before we did. But we changed it in the pandemic, rebranded, new logo, new everything. And we just knew that was the right season. And when we came out of the pandemic, we actually came into our new campus. We were building during the pandemic. And man, that was a faith journey all in itself. But so we've been Creative Church now for going on a little over 2 years.
Wow, you built the church during the pandemic. A lot of people paused during the pandemic, but you actually went forward and built it. I'm sure you're grateful, but can you tell us a little bit more about that faith journey to keep going forward in the midst of it?
Oh, it was such a faith journey. I mean, we had, everything was a green light leading into the pandemic. And, I remember watching the news, hearing that was it Kevin Gerald's church in Washington was going to be not meeting in person. I remember watching that Champions Church and going, my goodness, man, is that going to happen here? And we're writing, there's $1 million draws leaving, every couple of, every 30 days. And you're just like, these checks are leaving, and then you're not even meeting. And I begin to think, well, prophecy is clearly not my strong suit here. So, but I remember walking through the building and just going, God, you're faithful to begin a good work. You're going to complete it. And I look back now and thank God we kept going, because to build it now, the cost would be so much higher. And so I'm thrilled that we kept pushing through it. But we never got that big, grand opening that we were hoping for coming out of it. And I would say just within the last 3 to 6 months, we've seen that big growth of having a facility finally. But I'm still thankful. It was a faith journey for me, for sure.
Well, I know the city of Minnesota is blessed because of everything that city's gone through in the last 2 years or year and a half, and to be able to still push forward. And congratulations, man. I think every pastor or staff person watching this, listening to this, is applauding you for pushing forward in the midst of everything that was going on, that you could have paused or you could have just scrapped it, but you didn't. And you guys went forward. Now, from senior pastor to senior pastor, at the end of the day, we don't take out our violin, and I got like 5 staff members in here. We don't take out our violin and start going, oh, if you only knew what it was like to be a senior pastor. We go home, but at the end of the day, let's be honest, you're probably, Joanna goes to bed but Jonathan is sleeping with that albatross over his head
Oh
almost
man,
every night.
it was brutal. I mean, the George Floyd, when COVID hit,
Yeah.
our church rallied, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of churches did. When the George Floyd thing hit, it was like a bomb went off in our city. And I mean, with the riots, the division, I mean, having the National Guard in your city for months was just, I mean, blocks. I mean, I wouldn't blocks, but I guess just a few miles away, blocks from where I live, but just a few miles away. I mean, seeing Target boarded up, all these places boarded up like a hurricane's coming. I mean, it was just, the division was unbelievable. And just to try to bring everybody back together under the banner and anthem of Christ was definitely, you got the election going on and everything. I mean, it was just one thing after another. My wife was at the time pregnant with twins. I mean,
Wow.
we were going through all this kind of stuff, and I mean, it was one thing after another. I was like, whoever's holding the Hebrews, let them go. So these plagues stop. It was just like, what's happening? But yeah, we made it, and definitely have the battle scars to have and talk about. But it taught me a lot. God's faithful.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your faithfulness through all of that. I'd like to ask you, going off of that vein, what did you and Joanna see about your leadership? Like, how do you feel after this past 2 years or 3 years going, man, we crushed it. God was with us the whole way? Or do you like, well, I realized what I built my house on? Or what are the retrospective things that you think about now that you've got great growth, faith moving forward, build a building in a pandemic, settle a city down, rally a people? What's your retrospective look on your leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we learned a tremendous amount. Obviously things we would have, maybe done different, things we did right, things we did wrong. But it was at a point where you just felt like you couldn't win. You did too much, you did too little. I remember
said too much, didn't say enough.
Said too much, said too little. I remember we hosted Reverend Jesse Jackson when he came in. We took him down to the memorial site. We hosted him for the funeral of George Floyd, served, during that situation. Even with the pandemic, all the divisiveness. Are you wearing masks? Are you not wearing masks? Are you meeting? Are you not meeting? And we just decided we're gonna focus on Christ. We're gonna focus on truth, and truth became our anthem. Actually, the Lord brought back to my heart an old anthem I grew up with, which was, you've probably heard it, which was "Tell the truth, shame the devil."
Yeah,
and so I brought that back, and our church just rallied around that. That we're not trying to shame people, but we're going to put all the shame on the enemy. But we're also not.
I love that.
To speak truth in love. And so we just picked that up, and we said, grace lets people belong. Everybody's got this whole belong culture, belong, and grace lets people belong, but only truth sets people free. And so we just said, before the pandemic, we had X amount of members, and but there wasn't. It was a great belong culture, but coming out of it, we said, man, we're going to push truth like never before. And we lost people, but man, we gained a lot of people. And I'd say we have more unity than we've ever had. We have people who believe in the vision and support the vision more than we've ever had. And we still believe in grace, right? We're still a church that grace is huge. Yeah. It's our anthem, but we've got to speak truth and speak it in love. But, hard truth is still a truth, and a soft lie is still a lie. And, we've got to be intentional more than ever as a church, I think, to declare truth. And people are longing for it. People begin to tell us, like, I don't even know where to go to hear truth. I can't hear it on the news. I hear it on social media. And if the church doesn't speak it, when the church doesn't talk, people die. And I think more than ever, we've got to speak. So that's what we did. We rallied around truth. And we've just seen, I would attribute that honestly to our growth more than a building. More than anything we've done is just not being embarrassed or ashamed or shy to speak biblical truth, not opinion.
I love that. I love that. You're absolutely right. People are looking for truth. Even I'm looking for sources of truth. And if I'm looking for it, I guarantee you people either don't want to know anymore because it's just like put our fingers in our ears because of what's going on, or maybe because it's hard to find. But I think the church is the only place that they can hear the truth.
And that's what
Jonathan,
people are
yeah,
searching for. People are not searching for churches. They're not going
yeah,
on Google saying where churches. And most churches, when they spend their SEO money or their marketing money, are putting money into, like, churches in this city, independent churches. And people who don't go to church are they're searching, how do I read the Bible? What is truth? What is, how do I know Jesus is real? How do I know God is speaking to me? I would say if churches are going to spend marketing dollars and SEO dollars, spend it on those search engines, because those are the things people are actually searching.
wow, that's awesome. I think our entire staff is going to listen to this podcast. I almost want to go to these staff members and this is what we need to listen to this. And I'm not even trying to be flattering. Jonathan, so how did you get started? I mean, so I see that by 2003, you started the church, but tell us a little bit about your background. What is Brozozog? What kind of a last name is that? Were you a PK? Were you a MK? Were you, AK-47? What were you like? How'd you get started?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm fifth generation minister in my family.
Wow.
And I'm just thrilled to have that godly heritage. But my dad is actually from the Bahamas, Nassau, Bahamas. Wow. And my grandfather was from Poland. My real last name is Brozozog. And my grandfather was a Jew. He escaped Poland in World War II and joined the British Air Force that was stationed in the Bahamas, and met my grandmother, who was a Black Bahamian. And from that, had my dad, and then my dad got radically saved, honestly, and moved to the States as a young man at Lee University, actually, in Cleveland, Tennessee, and met my mother. And so, I've got two siblings, but when my grandfather came to the Bahamas, they changed the name to Brozozog. So I'm the only one with that last name. If you Google that last name, it's my family. And so I'm the only one you'll ever meet. So, wow. And then my wife's from Panama. So my wife speaks fluent Spanish and I speak fluent English. So we're bilingual as a couple, we say. So, but grew up in that denomination, the Church of God. And our church actually started in that. We were Church of God the first few years, and then went independent. And we've been independent now over, I think, 16 years. And it's just amazing what God did with 4 people. But yeah, I'm really proud of that heritage.
That is, I can imagine that, given your ethnicity, the diversity of that, and marriage and your kids. And when you look at the city that you actually minister in, it's become quite a diverse city, I would imagine, than the past 30 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, most people just look at me, they're like, oh, it's just a white guy, but I grew up in a diverse family. My wife grew up in a diverse family. I've never been one thing. And our church is extremely diverse. I don't think it's hard to be what you are. Mm-hmm. And so we've just celebrated who we are as a church and who Joanne and I are in our seasons. And the church has just been extremely diverse, not just in ethnicity, but in, men and women and in age. And I'm really proud of that. Our church started diverse, but more importantly than diversity, is unity. I think the world is screaming, diversity, but, the church has got to be focused on unity, because Christ didn't come to change our color. He came to change our character. And I think, the issue is not a skin issue. It's a sin issue, good. More than ever before. And I think that, people, well, we want to celebrate, our ethnicity in church. We want to celebrate our skin. I'm like, Christ came to kill our skin. We're supposed to put our flesh on the cross. We're supposed to celebrate who we are in Christ. And I would say my dad is probably my hero in that, because my dad came, as a person of color, came to America and was pastoring in an all-white denomination in the 70s in Georgia as a diverse couple. And in his identity, he never put his identity in his skin. He always told me his identity is in Christ. And to me, that's how I was raised. And I think more than ever before, helping people realize your identity is not in your skin tone. It's not in your gender. It's not in your ethnicity. It's in Christ, and Paul tells us that. So that's something that became an anthem in our church. and we wouldn't bend on it. And so I think more than ever, churches need to not be ashamed to speak that truth about our identity as Christians is first in Christ.
You mentioned your dad is one of your biggest influences and your heroes. I love that about you being a fifth generation pastor, your dad pastoring with your mom in Atlanta, Georgia. Could you tell me who else influenced your leadership style or hasn't had an impact on you as being a leader and a pastor?
Sure. The denomination I grew up in was very legalistic, Pentecost holiness, which I'm thankful for. I didn't see my first movie till I was 16 years old. It was just very, this is what it was,
Didn't even sneak off. You didn't even sneak off.
No, it was
13.
like,
no.
Oh my God, Jesus could come back while you're in the show, and you go to heaven. So, because, you don't take a chance. But, my uncle, T.L. Lowry, was a big influence in my life in terms of just another hero, my grandfather. But I was only exposed to what I had grown up in. One of the things that happened to our church and happened to Joanne and I was exposure. About several years in our ministry, we began to realize that the kingdom's so much bigger than what we had grown up in. The kingdom was so much bigger. And I think just the willingness to be coachable, teachable, and to allow the Lord to expose us to different ways of reaching people ignited a creativity in me. And a lot of people don't know this, but I'm dyslexic. And so, I always, things weren't as clear as they are now when I was growing up. It was like, you're not paying attention, you're being a brat, you're not focusing. And so, but I'm dyslexic. So one of the things about people who struggle with dyslexia, it's like you have the same hardware everybody else has, the same software everybody else has, but like somebody spilled coffee on your keyboard. And so you can't access the information like everybody. So you have to come up with creative ways to access the information. And that birthed in me just a strategy or out of necessity, an ability to think of ways through a different lens. And we've used that in coming up with different ways to reach people over the years. And what was you could call it dysfunction is actually a blessing in disguise, huh?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Jonathan, can I ask a question? Where was the first place, when you got outside of the denominational walls that you were in, what was the first place that you went to? Who was that leader that you went like, wow, just opened up your horizons, your eyes, and all kinds of possibilities?
Steve Muncie from Family Christian Chicago was the guy that I connected with, and John Morgan flew there, his son, Kent Muncie. And I remember going to see Steve Muncie, and I don't know what was happening. I think Bishop Jakes was speaking that night or something.
Wow.
But Steve put on the biggest dog and pony show you'd ever seen in your life. I mean, it was pyro and people were flying through the air and horses were running through the building. I mean, and I was just like, this is church. Like, you can do that. And it just started to unlock for me a lot of creativity and possibilities of what could be possible to reach people.
I love that, Steve Muncie. For me, I'll be honest, for me, it was Hillsong. And that's what it was. My first time in Sydney, but not Hillsong Conference. I actually just went to Hillsong Church, and I could not believe it. I still admire them to this day. I'm very, very grateful for Brian and Bobby Houston's impact.
So powerful. They're brilliant.
So leaders. Amazing. Let me ask you two more questions. Do you feel that the church needs to do things differently to reach people as we move forward? And if so, how? What are the different things that we need to be doing differently?
On top of the church speaking truth and along with grace, I think the church has to get involved in the business sector. I think the church needs to get involved in, not pulling away from that world. I mean, John Maxwell's been a great voice to both of us in that arena. But for years, our church took on an entrepreneurial spirit. Our church started companies. I remember years ago before we had a building, we started U-Haul franchises. And It gave us access to trucks, and we met all the people moving to our city. We met all the people moving in and throughout our city. And a lot of people don't know it, but it doesn't cost anything to start a U-Haul franchise. It literally costs nothing to start that. I don't mean I mean literally nothing. It doesn't cost $5. And so you just had to be able to have a place for them to park the trucks. And that gave us access to vehicles. That gave us an opportunity to meet all the people moving throughout our city and in our city. We started a web and marketing company. We were the only church in America that ran a driving school, because the one thing every teenager in the world wants to do is drive.
I thought about doing that.
Yeah, well, we did it. We did it for 8 years, and it funded our youth program. It gave our youth leaders, literally were in the car with 50 new teenagers every month, meeting them and engaging them. We started an event center, and recently we've started Cell Phone Permit, which is the first online course that teaches kids about the downfalls and challenges and pitfalls of having a cell phone, which we see more and more we need. And so we started that. So I mean, I just think being involved in the business sector, and we want kids in church, so we have kids ministry. We want teenagers in church, so we have youth ministry. We want business leaders in our church, but we don't do anything. I think more than ever we need to engage the business sector and the business arm of the church, and just get back involved in what we started, whether it be schools. The government didn't start schools, churches did. The government didn't start universities, churches did. So I think that it's time a little bit to reclaim a lot of our God-given heritage and get involved in areas that we've abandoned.
I love it, Jonathan. I think with the Inspire Collective that we've started with me and Dr. Sam Chand and your entrepreneurial spirit, I think this will go great with what we're doing with the collective. I didn't know that you started so many businesses. We need to talk about how to start a U-Haul business.
Yeah, right on.
We really do. We really do. And but I love it. I love it because you're not content to let's just do church Saturday, Sunday night, midweek, and run programs throughout the week. You sound like the kind of pastor that's got irons in the fire. He's got plates that are spinning. He's got everything that you can think of in order. Although you're not so wide that you're not deep. You're thinking business. You're thinking influence. You're thinking impact. Tell us where did you get that from, and give us a little bit more on that philosophy on kingdom.
Yeah, I think some of it comes out of just necessity. We didn't start. I look at guys now and they're like, well, we can't make it. I'm like, you can make it. You have so many things that, like, there was no art, there was no social media, there was no iPhone, I remember making clip art on Xerox machines trying to fold for a shirt. So I'm like, you can absolutely make it. And we had to start. We had no finances, we had no resources. We had to start. I call it guerrilla. It's just a little bit of a guerrilla mindset. We didn't have money.
Did you read guerrilla marketing? Did you read the Guerrilla Marketing Handbook?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had to. That was I
have to like these staff members, some of the younger ones, they have no idea that the Guerrilla Marketing Handbook taught us how to hit somebody 7 different ways, 7 different times, right?
You had to. I mean, we didn't have money for marketing, so we found out the Boy Scouts had to volunteer. So we would get our yard signs and put maps on them, and parents would bring their Boy Scouts and pick them up and put our signs all over the Twin Cities. I mean, we had to do whatever we had to do. And we had to learn really on to create a strong volunteer culture. And I'll tell you, one of our campuses, I'll tell you this quick story about one of our campuses. When I walked in to meet with the owner to buy it, it had really high ceilings, like 34-foot high ceilings. And he told me, he said, this building, what it was originally built for? I said, what is that? He said, it was originally built for volleyball. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's interesting. I said, oh yeah, I can see where the courts were. It's indoor. And he goes, the interesting thing about volleyball. And I said, what is that? He said, it's the only sport where there's no superstars. And I said, that's true. Why is that? He said, because in volleyball, nobody gets to own a position. At some point, everyone has to serve.
Yeah.
And that mentality of serving literally transformed our church. And literally, when people become leadership, we give them a volleyball and say, your identity is not in this position. Your identity is that you're on the team. And that really empowered us in our businesses. We had volunteers running U-Haul, volunteers running driver's ed, volunteers running a lot of businesses that we've done, not just in church on Sunday, but even within our businesses as well.
I love that. My daughters are big into volleyball, and I got asked to do the chapel of the University of West Virginia women's volleyball team when they come to Hawaii. Cool. I'm gonna take that analogy. I never heard that one before. I never heard anybody
go ahead.
say that.
I mean, it wrecked us, and so we actually teach that now in our church and our culture. And so letting people have their identity in the fact that they're on the team. But I think just being willing to think outside the box. We do things that sometimes people who grew up in church might think are weird or funny, but bait tastes bad to fishermen, fish love it. So we'll do everything from Thriller. We do in February, we do freemypillow.com, and we give away a free My Pillow, because that's a Minnesota brand, free My Pillow. Pillow. And we literally will have hundreds of people come through the door. And then we have the second largest state fair in the nation. And we bought freestatefairticket.com, and we'll give everybody a free state fair ticket. We'll have literally 1,000 first-time visitors come through the door to get a free state fair ticket. And we just say, we want to give you the gift of family time. And just, I think, thinking as a pastor, what can you do to hook your wagon to what culture is already heading towards, where people are thinking? If you can hook your wagon to it and not promote your church. Again, people aren't looking for a church. They're looking for something else. And so that's why we would promote free My Pillow or free state fair ticket or something like that. And to see them come through the door and see people give their life to Christ, just thinking outside the box in those arenas is something that we had to do from the very beginning. And so I don't want to complain about our struggle, because I think the struggle is what led us to our success.
I love it. Everybody, you are listening to Pastor Jonathan Brozozog on the Pound for Pound Leader podcast, just dropping dimes left and right all over this podcast. And Jonathan, I think as we get to know each other, I think that the conversation becomes rawer and realer. I'd love to do this again if you got time after the summer.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I just appreciate, just being willing to take the time to talk, and anything I can do to add value, to the kingdom and help guys and people in ministry. I think, we need that more than ever, is just the team and the collaboration.
I agree. I think when the sun goes down sooner in the month of October, November, and it stays dark in the Great North, that's when you should come to Hawaii.
I'm down.
We've got a conference, we've got something, we've got entrepreneur stuff that you should come be a part of it. And I know Darnell. You know Darnell, right?
Yeah, he's a great friend of mine out of St. Louis.
Yeah, I got to call him, because he's going to take his sabbatical here in Hawaii, and the time that he comes is the day that I'm leaving. So I'm going to miss him.
Oh yeah, he's great. Darnell is absolutely fantastic. And I actually met him years ago at a round table. Him and I used to travel the United States together and do roundtables with Ted Haggard. And so we talking about grace and restoration. That's where I actually ended up meeting Darnell years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, really
Jonathan,
cool.
I'm really grateful for your time. I'd love to get off the podcast and talk to you later on, maybe a week from now, and just to say hi. But thank you so much for your time. I know it's a 6-hour difference there, and you hitting up dinner time coming up soon. But I want to thank you for your time, everybody. Thank you to Joanne. Thank you to creativechurch.org and all that you guys are doing in the Twin Cities. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Now, don't forget to hit subscribe to receive the latest episode. And I would love for you to follow me on Instagram at MikeTai, and let me know what you got out of this week's podcast. I'll see you next week, where we're helping to take your leadership from one peak to the next.